We chose Cambridge from Chicago. We did our research and found that Cambridge would be an ideal place to retire when we wanted to do that a few years ago. If we were raising a family, though, I think it'd be a different story, and I think that's the keystone issue with Dorchester County, is that the Dorchester schools remain at the bottom of the state and keep people from moving good jobs here. People, young families, people with children, take a look at the schools and they say no thanks. And what I'm wondering is how can we overcome the habitual lack of progressive policies and leadership associated with the schools at the lower levels?
Do any of our panelists have comments or response to that? And we can ask if others in the audience do.
I would like to say this on behalf of the party. Elections matter. Elections matters. From the federal level to the state level to the local levels. And not only do elections matter, but what happens after election. We have to, sometimes I visit and I go to various school board meetings, and there's maybe one or two people there, and critical decisions are being made that impact our kids. Same thing sometimes at county level or city council. We have to show up and make it known that what's important to us. And the truth is, from the state level, what works in Baltimore won't work here. And the hard decision I think many rural communities have to make is that decision between maintaining the quiet retirement community and economic growth. Sometimes those things require a bit of compromise. When you want to bring in industry, when you want to bring in technology, when you want to bring in a new economic base, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that you sacrifice the quality of living for those who are from here. That don't mean that gentrification happens, whether it's race, whether it's income, that as the city rises, everyone should rise. However, that economic growth is going to require some change on everyone's behalf, meaning there are going to be more people in town, which means there's a new investment in infrastructure. That the roads, the cities, the schools, and that's why from the top up, from the president, the money that's been fought for to go into infrastructure, to go into broadband, to go into our communities, and the decision that the governor has made as far as broadband, the gap year, what he's doing with the blueprint, those are things that invest in the future. And a lot of times from an economic perspective, things that don't make money today, no one cares about. But we look at 5-10 years down the line, planting seeds for fruit for our kids. And it's important that right now we show up, frustrated as we may be, and make sure that we don't give up this fight to make a difference, and that we have elected officials that understand that we might not agree on everything, but making sure everyone has a fair chance to grow, making sure our communities are somewhere that we want to come to, that our kids want to stay on, and then when people come here, they feel welcome. It's an important thing to be focused on who we put in office.
Thank you. I hear you loud and clear, and it is sad and it's disappointing when I look at the statistics when we're in Annapolis and looking at the budget of where the funding is going and how much and where our numbers are with our young people and the school district. I just have to probably echo what Mr. Browning said, that elections matter. Make sure you are continually holding elected officials accountable. In this community, we have elected school boards, attend the school board meetings, question the members, and ask them to dive a little deeper. And what I'm saying behind that is, right now my staff is still working with a mother whose child has continuously been bullied. And the responsiveness level has been disheartening. So when a child is bullied, they obviously can't learn, and they can't be their best self, and their parent can't go to work with a calm sense of understanding that their child is being taken care of in the school system. So that to me is frustrating. We reached out to the State Board of Education, no response. It's frustrating as someone who knows and understands, and I had 2 sons of my own. They're out of school now, but I want to always make sure that all kids are safe. So that's one point. The second point I'll say is that we just recently passed legislation around the teacher shortage. There's a huge teacher shortage in this state, and so this particular bill looks at the school systems to go to the HBCUs to really make a concerted effort to work with the historically black colleges and universities to incentivize males to come into the teaching industry, but to work with them throughout the process. And the other thing that used to be, and still to this day is a problem, but this piece of legislation helps, is the fact that when student teachers come in, they often don't have any pay. They're just trying to, get the hours that they need to become a teacher. But this particular bill helps that. It gives them some financial support while they're getting their hours. So I think that's, a push and a move in the right direction there. The blueprint funding, yes, is huge. And it's going to take everybody's effort to realize if this is where we want to go in a community with the outcomes of having all kids in full day pre-K, not just based on their income, but based on the fact that they're a child of 3 and 4 year olds that need to be in the school system to get that full education. That's going to help our next generation. The fact that we are addressing the disability children, making sure that they're getting their needs met. So it's a whole comprehensive issue, but I think everybody needs to be at the Board of Education needs to support and to have that support that the whole system needs. And I'm not just referring just to teachers. Our bus drivers, they need support. There's a shortage there. Our custodial staff, they need support there. So it's like a whole gamut of things that need to be addressed in the school system, but we have to be at the table to help them make those decisions and to hold them accountable. So that's where I think that is part of the conversation. But lastly, yes, we do need to increase our scores and we need to increase our numbers. But we only get there by knowing that people are being held accountable and where the funding goes. For example, after school programs. I know that this county rejected funding from the state of Maryland and from the federal government to continue with the after school program. So when those type of things happen, that's frustrating because you done just lost about 100 some kids in one school in particular.
And that means going to your county council, just mention that.
Yes, and going to your county council. And just, it's exciting to say, money comes to the community, but what happens with the money? Does it stay? Do you send it back? And what that impact is huge. And so I raised the example of the after-school program because I know the impact of a program such as that. And when you have your dollars leaving this community and going back and saying to the state and the federal government, oh, we didn't get a chance to use it, or we're changing our way of doing things. Well, at the same time, Johnny and Susie, they still need somebody to help them with their homework in the afternoon, a good meal, and to be able to be in a safe venue while the parent is still working. So all of these things are concerns for me, but it goes back to accountability, and that's where we need to be. At the county council meetings, and I told people for years, show up, even if you don't even know what's on the agenda. Sit there with a notepad and pretend you're taking notes and go home and dissect it. And then you can have a conversation. If not, then call up your county council member and say, hey, what did this mean? What are you talking about? And where's the funding coming from this? See if that will be an approach to hold everybody accountable, hold me accountable. If I'm not speaking where you want me to speak or follow through on funding, then hey, let's work on it. And that's what it's going to take. It just can't say we're going to take the federal funds and the state funds and the local funds that are put towards these initiatives and we just say, okay, go do it. You got to show up to make sure that it gets done because a lot of times the money is given back, but the issue's still there.
Could I, from the audience, add something to the education topic?
Yes, and I'm going to ask for brief comments.
Okay, I'm going to be as fast as the energy source is going to allow me to be. I think one of the things, because teachers work hard, the school system is a tough system with the kids that we try to teach today. But I challenge the system. If it's broke, why aren't we fixing it? We've been trying the same system over and over and over and over and over. I tell the story all the time. I had a learning curve as a kid. I didn't learn like everybody else. I had to learn a different way to learn. Every kid that's sitting in the class does not learn the same way. First, point one. I think that the trouble that we have in schools with our African American kids, they don't know who the hell they are or where they come from. So, The next thing would be, let's look at another system. Maybe it's a charter school for certain grade levels, just to see whether or not a new program, a new process could work for our students. So, policy setters, how do you change the policy? Talk to the community and tell us how we change those policies. How do we get engaged? Not just sitting at the table, but participating in a way where we are speaking it into existence with action. Changing the system, going against the grain. That's the only way this thing gonna change. And what we use is called a holistic approach. Not the system approach, but a holistic approach. Let's Google it and see what that means and see what that exists of. The only way that this is going to change, we have to get out of our own way, and we know that we are in our own way. Change this system. Figure out how to do it, maybe in a small way, to see if it works. But I guarantee you, if our African American kids knew they came from kings and queens, and it was taught in their household, it would be changed quickly.
Just putting on my, again, economic developer's hat, this is not Cambridge Harbor. There seems to be, particularly in small rural communities that I've lived in many of them for a long time and consulted to many of them, there's a fundamental misunderstanding of the value of education to the economy. I applaud you, Mr. Brady, for saying, we're retired, we don't have kids in school, but if we did, it would be an issue. It should be an issue for people who are retired, don't have kids in school. The amount of taxes paid by business as opposed to private citizens into the general fund, the local economy, the county, the state economy is disproportionately larger than the benefit that they get back out. The only way you can expand the business base is by having the right workforce. The only way to have the right workforce is to have the right education system. So by funding the education system effectively, and to Jermaine's point, operating it effectively, you will decrease or at least put pressure downward on the tax rates for those people who don't have children in school, because the businesses bear a larger percentage of that. So it does start with, at the ground level, getting the right workforce, which means the right education system and the right people, to then expand business base, which then really helps private citizens who maybe don't have the wherewithal, the funds, maybe they're at a lower income or maybe retired. It reduces their tax burden. So people have to make that connection. It's just critical.
Hi, I want to make a comment first, which is that I'm under this terrible tension that I'm getting the red ink here that we should be finishing up. We're supposed to finish at noon, so I need to wrap it up. We could take a last question, and then I'm going to invite people, once we close, to Neil and continue discussion. Please keep it focused.
My name is Susan Olson. I'm a retired reading specialist, and I taught in the largest prison in Maryland for 16 years. When I moved to Cambridge, I tried substituting in the public schools, and I gave up because the kids wouldn't listen to me. They were so out of control. And nobody can learn that way. So I think that we should start putting volunteers in the classroom. The theory is that it's better to be bad than to be stupid. So a lot of kids are acting out with that. So anyway, that's just my suggestion, that just having another adult in the classroom helps calm everything down.
Thank you, Susan, for that. I think you've just introduced our next topic, if we have another brown bag, which may be on education, because there's a lot of enthusiasm and energy and community spirit around making sure that folks, the kids are educated and can be part of a prosperous Dorchester County. I gave myself the task of summarizing, but we're running late and it's hard to summarize across all of these issues. I think one of the major messages come out from our panel is that there is substantial funding, government commitment to supporting a vision of economic growth with shared prosperity. And I think we just only began to scratch the surface of some of the legislation that the Maryland legislature, that the U.S. Congress and others are putting in place, and the funds that are coming through to do that. And a lot of those efforts, turning to Mr. Leonard, even the private sector efforts that are in public-private partnerships are making shared prosperity a goal and making sure that our community does have access to the fruits of these private sector investments, and that creates jobs, but also recreational space and retail and all the other things that people have mentioned today. So there does seem to be a movement on this. How do we capture it and make it sustained, keep these efforts going, as Mr. Meekins mentioned? One of the answers to that is to continue collaborations between communities, community leaders, businesses, and elected officials. I think, if I recall, Rideout, you mentioned several venues here in the Cambridge context where people can come and have a voice and keep their eye on things. Delegate Sample Hughes yourself, you were speaking of the need to show up, the need to vote, but beyond voting, to hold our officials accountable, but also to keep tracking what's happening and how it's coming down. Because there's been a huge amount of money. The system's awash in money. Is it going where it needs to go, or is it just indebting us? And I think that's a legitimate concern to see where this money is going, how it's benefiting, what's being turned around to go back because we weren't ready for it. So I heard that message very strongly. And I think that, speaking as a convener here, we are the Dorchester Democratic Party. We're not per se a player precisely in the economic development of our town, but we're very keen on making sure that people are making these connections and information is flowing, and we very much appreciate having you come and tell us what these issues are, because we reflect them back up, as Mr. Browning has said, we reflect them back up by who we support and elect on some of these initiatives. So you'll see, you probably have seen us increasingly active in some of these domains, working for candidates that encapsulate the kinds of initiatives that you're talking about and making sure that information is flowing. We are very much open for suggestions. We thank you very much all for coming, and we hope that this dialogue is fruitful to you and continues. Please make sure that you have filled out our survey so we can improve on how we do that and partake of, I'm going to adjourn us, but invite you to continue going and talking as necessary. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our